Have you heard of index funds but wondered how exactly to invest in them? Well, you're in luck. Today, we're answering the questions you are too embarrassed to ask when it comes to index fund investing. Hello, and welcome to the Wealth Minded MD podcast with your money best friends. I'm Dr. Leisha Taylor.
And I'm Dr. Brittany Halford.
And of course, we're here to help you build wealth and make good money decisions so you can create the life you desire with more control over your time.
Hey, Leisha, one of the most important financial tasks we do as doctors is protect ourselves, which means getting the right insurance. I recall purchasing my insurance policy just a few days before I graduated from residency. What was your experience?
So I got my insurance when I graduated from medical school right before I started residency. I actually called a few agents, but I had the best service from Pradeep Auto at PKA Insurance Group. He was super responsive and personable. Unlike some of the other agents, Pradeep actually got me quotes from all the major companies and actually took the time to explain the nuances in each of their policies. What I loved most is that he wasn't just this way for me. Whenever I would send one of my friends to him, he would not only speak to them, but he'd also let them know where to go or who to contact if there were better options or discounts available.
At PKA Insurance Group, Pradeep Auto and Matthew Peterson are independent brokers focusing on disability and life insurance. They excel in securing coverage for physicians and other medical professionals. Discounts on disability insurance can range from 10 to 40% depending on your situation. And there is now an A-plus rated carrier offering up to $10 million of life insurance without lapse. If you are very healthy with limited to no medical issues, approval is likely in 5 minutes. Reach out to PKA Insurance to discuss your disability or life insurance needs at www.pkainsurance.com or call 1-800-258-1018.
All right, Brittany, I am enjoying life here in Atlanta. How are things going over there for you in Boston?
Oh my gosh, Leisha, I feel like the year started and it's like when you start the treadmill on faster than you expect to run and you're like trying to catch up. My gosh, there are so many things that are happening for a little bit more attention. One, taxes is always a thing, like getting the 1099s together and putting together a nice, clean package for our CPA. So that's weighing on me. And also balancing out time at work and time with family. And so we've been thinking about what are going to be our travel plans for the rest of the year. And my husband and I, we sat down, we kind of mapped it out. Then I asked ChatGPT to put together an itinerary with all the dates and all the things. And I'm like, oh, this is a lot of travel. And with a lot of travel, sometimes I know you use points, so give me all of your tips, but sometimes that means a lot of money. So I'm like, how am I going to do all of this?
Yeah. Travel is one of those things I enjoy. Paying for travel is not. That's one of the reasons why I've gotten so into credit card hacking and using points for travel. I know that it is kind of early in the year. As we're recording this, it's the end of January. I know this comes out in early to mid February, but what sort of travel are you planning at this time of the year? Normally, this is when I'm like re-upping my travel budget from all the travel I took last year. What trips are you planning?
So one is winter break. So that in Massachusetts or Boston comes like February 15th through the 25th. That's one trip. And then I am speaking at Society of Hospital Medicine conference this year in April, but that also coincides with spring break for Brooke, which typically I would go by myself, but I'm like, okay, I don't want to keep you at home all this time with grandma. So maybe we could just make this a family trip. Kevin's going to come, my mom and my aunt are going to come, and they're going to go to Vegas with me. And so I'm trying to figure out how many hotels rooms do we need? Do I need a separate one like the day before the event so that I could just get my mind right, be unencumbered by my kids? I mean, I love my kids, but sometimes they pull on me and drain my energy, right? And I want to show up in a good way for the conference. And how do I balance actually going to the conference, understanding and learning from the conference while balancing out my time with my family? It's just a lot flowing through my mind right now and trying to plan all of these things.
Well, I have so many thoughts, as I'm sure you already know. One, what's wrong with grandma? Grandma's like, hey, why am I catching strays? There's nothing wrong with Brooke staying with grandma. The other thought that I had was Vegas is fantastic. I'm not sure if I thought of it as a child friendly place, though. So, what are you planning to do family fun wise? And then the third thing I had was you are a better person than me, as I'm realizing currently, because when I am at conferences and my friends are there, let's just say attending in person conference events is not my number one priority.
I think we're similar, and I like to relax when I'm at conference as well. And so I think finding some balance with the kids and going to the conference will allow me to relax in a different way. But also, I'm just so busy. So this is an opportunity for me to learn and make sure that I understand what's new on the market as far as heart failure and managing diabetes. And so I really want to make sure that I'm up and current on the new and the latest and the greatest in medicine. And there are other ways that I can do that. Sometimes I defer it, to be honest. So it's like, okay, I'm here. This is my time to get everything that I can to learn. And nothing is wrong with grandma. The kids are actually going to go to grandma's for the first time in May. My husband and I are planning another trip to Canada in May. And then we're going to do our Greece trip later on because I'm still trying to figure out how to leverage the credit card points to do the transfers most efficiently, et cetera. So there's just a lot going on. In Vegas, we have a friend there who my husband went to medical school with, and she has two girls. So I think I'm going to tap her to say, hey, like, what should we do? But one of the conference hotels is Mandalay Bay. And I know they have this river for kids and a few other kid activities. So we're going to do that and probably go to the Grand Canyon as well. And we'll find something. I mean, if they spend all day at the pool, they're going to be happy.
Okay. All right. And then just to put a financial spin on this, do you have this massive travel budget? Like, how are you doing this in like a financially sound way? Or maybe you're just saying, you know what? We budgeted for this. We're going to spend and we're going to just enjoy ourselves.
I haven't thought about the budget as much as I probably should. And that's because I think the trip is a little bit farther away. Because I'm speaking at the trip, some of my personal cost will be covered. And then I'm thinking, okay, should I leverage credit card points? And this is something I know you mostly use your credit card points for international travel. And this is more of a domestic trip. So we'll likely just purchase using a credit card that gives us a bonus for travel when we're spending on travel. So we'll probably use our Amex Platinum to purchase the tickets and just pay for cash. And then I'm going to just plan ahead and pay as we get the expenses, but no budget as of right now. And I imagine that it's going to be a pretty expensive trip. But this year, I'm not purchasing too many things. We want to purchase a home and we want to travel. So this is part of the goal of traveling. So I need to think a little bit more about how to spend the money. But I know that some things, like my mother-in-law says, Brittany, if you look at the cost, you just won't do it. So just do it. So I'm just going to say, okay, this is something for the family and we will make it work.
Wait, did you just say you're buying a house? You want to buy a house? Didn't you just buy a house?
No, we're buying rental properties. So I should have characterized it a little bit better.
Wait, what? So, okay, because I thought I heard you say we're not purchasing too many things. And then you go, I mean, we want to buy a house. I'm like, what? Like, okay, you got different definitions.
So rental properties, we're buying rental properties this year.
But still, that's like a massive purchase to me. I don't know. Again, this is another acknowledgement of like we live in different worlds, but that's okay. I'm happy for you. I'm like apartment living, trying to purchase home number one. And you're like, yeah, we got two. Now's the year we're going to add the third. And I'm like, okay, cool.
I need to sit down and map it all out, but I have a preliminary plan and I have purchased a real estate book and talked to a real estate investor in New York to get some ideas on how to leverage other people's money and do some creative financing. So I'm not all the way there yet with the strategy, but I'm just like, okay, let me just save up coins because I know it's going to take some money to do this and just making sure that we have our savings in the appropriate way.
All right. I love it. I love it. As we move on to our money mishaps and confessions, I'll keep along with your travel theme. One of the things that I admire is that you are at least trying to plan these trips in advance. I myself am also a planner. The problem is that the people I travel with are not. I'm like talking to my partner. I'm like, okay, well, where should we go in April or May or for my birthday? Right. And he's like, I don't know. I talk to my family. I'm like, should we do a family vacation this year? And they're like, we don't know. Yeah, I talk to my girlfriends. I'm like, you want to take a trip in the fall? They're like, I don't know, maybe. And so I'm like, okay, this is kind of an issue. If you know about booking travel with points, is you have to book early for the most part in order to get the best deals. And so I'm always like, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready. The problem is they're not. And so I can't really book it until we're all on the same page. And so I'm still trying to figuring out what we're going to do sometimes where I've not booked in time and I've missed out on some of those really good deals. Sometimes you can get a business class / first class flight from the States to Europe for like 50,000 credit card points, but the longer you wait, that price goes up. It might be 70,000 points. It might require 100,000 points. And so just knowing that the cost of those trips and points increases the more I delay really makes me a little anxious. And so I'm trying to avoid that this year and get some better deals. There's one thing that's top of mind. So a part of that means that I've been bugging the people I'm traveling with, like, please make your plans, figure out what's happening. Do we have vacation time? Like, I've become a little bit of a pest lately, but all for good reason of saving money and hopefully utilizing points in the best way.
Okay, Alicia, so I have a question for you because I feel that wholeheartedly. And that's one of the reasons why we have not booked the Greece trip yet, is because I'm still figuring out, okay, how do I transfer the points to Emirates? What do I do? And then I need to look at the dates. So I watched a YouTube video and the guy was like, so basically you check the dates that you want to go. And then if there are no reward seats available, then you change the week and you go to the next week and you go to the next week. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how many weeks am I going to go through before I find a business class flight that's reasonable for a number of points? And then one of the things that I've heard is that it's rare to find like 2 business class flights for the same amount of points. So if you don't mind, as a newbie to this, can you share your approach? Because I have not solidified a date because I want to get the best rate. But then also because of kind of the overwhelm of doing it, I haven't looked at any dates.
Yeah. So I will say, I don't think finding 2 business class flights is rare. I think it is rare to find 4 or 5 or 6, right? So if you're trying to travel with your family, you've got a couple of kids, there's only a few airlines that release enough reward seats in business class to allow for the entire family to travel in business class. But I don't think 2 is hard to find at all. When I was
Okay.
relatively new to the credit card points game, maybe 3 months after I had started collecting credit card points, I booked business class flights for myself and my partner to South Africa with my family for the family vacation. When I went to Paris for the Olympics, I had booked 2 seats for that. When I went to South of France for a wedding, I ended up going to that wedding by myself, but I had actually booked 2 seats for myself and my friend. She just couldn't go at the last minute. And so I'm not a pro by any means, but if I could sort of learn how to do this relatively soon into the game, my personal experience, I will say, is that it has not been as difficult. One of the things that I will do is see which airlines do direct flights from the airport closest to me. Like if I know that I'm going to Paris, for example, I will say which airlines fly direct from the airport in Atlanta to Paris. And I will see that because I don't enjoy taking a bunch of layovers. And so I will see which airlines fly direct. And then I will go into those specific airline websites and I will look at award space in those websites. So for example, Virgin Atlantic, which is a SkyMiles partner of Delta, for example, I will just look at their calendar view. And sometimes you can see a month at a time what the prices of different flights are in business class or premium economy or regular economy. And I can get a sense for what those flight costs are. Same thing with Air France, which is a SkyMiles partner of Delta, Air Canada, which is kind of a big international airline that tends to have a lot of award space. So those are 3 of the airlines that I specifically go to. And I will look on those specific airline websites and just see what business class seats they have available. Another thing that you can do, since you have an American Express card, is I think it's points.me. If you have an American Express card, which clearly you do, Amex has like a sub portal within the points.me website where you can use it for free. And what it will do is you can put where you're starting from and your destination, and it will tell you all the airlines that have business class flights there. And it will tell you how many points it is. And it will tell you which credit card points you need in order to transfer them. So some people will kind of just start at some of those general websites. Think of it like Google Flights, but for credit card points. And so some people will kind of just start there to start their search, and then they'll verify that that flight is available on the individual airline website. I know this probably sounds like hogwash to people who are not in the credit card point space. Hopefully I did not confuse you. But my point was that I want to alleviate some fear that it is difficult to find two business class flights. That has not been my personal experience. And I want to let you know that there's general websites like the points.me website that you can go through. You can also look at the individual airline websites, which is what I've done, and just looked at their calendar view so I can see a week or a month at a time.
Okay, I love that. I think that that helps to alleviate some of the overwhelm that is leading to paralysis in this. So, thank you so much. I'm going to check out that points.me website and the Amex portal.
Yeah. If you Google amexpoints.me, it'll have a direct link for how you can use that website for free and get all the perks and stuff. Hopefully that was helpful. As physicians, one of the most important things that we can do is make sure that we secure our income, because a lot of our financial plans are contingent on our high doctor income. One of the things that you will need to do is make sure that you get long-term disability insurance.
Now, Pradeep and his team at PKA Insurance Group have a reputation for putting people over profits and always doing what's best. Do not hesitate to email PKA Insurance and his team today.
They will help you get the insurance you need with the service you deserve. All right, now into our financial focus. I wanted to do this episode today because it is still the beginning of the year. I don't know about your employer, but my employer this year, Brittany, has actually switched vendors. So we have a retirement account that I can get through my job, right? It's a 403B because I work for a nonprofit institution versus if you worked for a for-profit institution, it would be called a 401k. But I have access to a 403B and we switched vendors. What do I mean by that? That means where the money in the retirement account is held is now going to be switched to a different company. It used to be Nationwide and now it's being switched to Fidelity, which I'm happy about because most of the places that I've worked have the retirement accounts at Fidelity. And so now I will be able to log into my Fidelity account and see all my retirement accounts from the different jobs as well as my Roth IRA and all of that stuff. So I'm happy everything is going to be consolidated. But it got me thinking, because the vendors being moved, we have different options of what we can invest in. And I know that this is the time of the year where people start thinking about doing their Roth IRA, or better get their backdoor Roth IRA. And again, this requires people to select what things they want to invest in. And I know that some people like myself, right, we don't necessarily purchase a bunch of individual stocks. I don't have time to research the market and figure out which companies are going to hit this year and which aren't. And even if you think oftentimes you're not correct, these things can be hard to predict. And so a lot of people, including myself, choose to invest in index funds. And most people have maybe heard of that term index funds, but they may not be clear on what that is or how exactly to go about investing in index funds. Have you found that to be a common question, Brittany?
Yes, definitely. I think when we think about investing, we think that it's super complicated. And index funds is one of the ways that simplifies it. But many people are still very hesitant or overwhelmed because it's still part of investing. So, Leisha, I'm so happy that you brought this up. And when I think about my journey to investing, index funds was the way that I started. And essentially, just what is an index fund? So, it's like a type of mutual fund that is designed to mimic the performance of a specific market. So, let's say this S&P 500, which is the top 500 performing large capital companies within the United States. So, it pools money from many different investors to buy stocks that make up the index it tracks. So if you're buying, like you said, Fidelity, an index from Fidelity, then it's Fidelity's version of a mix of stocks or bonds that will track a particular index. So what have you found, Leisha, in like conceptualizing the index fund and what it means for people when you're advising them? Like, what are some of the hesitancies, confusion about purchasing them, and also just understanding how they operate?
Yeah, so I think the biggest confusion and hesitancy is people don't fully understand what it is. And so I always try to explain it similarly to you, but I kind of start even more basic than that and say, a stock is ownership of a public company. So if you own Netflix, you own a little sliver of Netflix. If you buy Disney, you own a little sliver of the company Disney. And so I will explain stock as ownership in a public company and bond as an IOU. Bond is you lending money to a company or the government or a group of people and getting your money back with interest. So a bond is like an IOU versus buying a stock is like a little sliver of ownership. And I will explain the mutual fund is when you buy multiples at a specific time. So a mutual fund is a group of stocks or a group of bonds. And then I will say that an index fund is also called an index mutual fund. So it's a type of mutual fund. So it's a type of group of stocks or group of bonds that follows, like you said, an index. What is an index? An index is a metric with a specific set of parameters. So if you have the S&P 500, that is an index or a metric of the top 500 companies in America. So if you're in the top 500, you're going to be in the S&P 500. What is the total stock market index? That is an index that basically says every stock in America can be in my index. And so it has a specific set of parameters. So when you purchase an index mutual fund, also called an index fund, you are purchasing a group of stocks or a group of bonds that follows that index. And there's a lot of different indexes. The next question that I usually get from people is, well, why should I do that versus just buying the individual stocks, right? If I know that Tesla's a profitable company, why wouldn't I just buy Tesla? If I know that Meta is a profitable company, why wouldn't I just buy Meta? Why do you, Leisha, why do you, Brittany, say that buying an index fund or a group of different stocks is better than just buying the stock that I know is pretty profitable? And my answer to that is just because a company was profitable in the past does not mean that it's going to continue to be profitable in the future. Just because a company is large now does not mean that it is going to continue to grow at the same pace, right? You don't make money by just buying stock in a large company. You make money when the stock that you've purchased increases in value. So if you already have a large company, how do you know that those large companies are going to continue to be profitable in the future? And not just continue to be profitable tomorrow, but continue to be profitable next year, the next 10 years, the next 30 years, right? Because if you look at the S&P 500 and the companies that were in it 50 years ago, that looks very different than the companies that are in it right now. So the top 500 companies, they change over time. And because you don't know which ones are going to continue to be profitable 10 years down the line, 30 years down the line, when you purchase an index fund, you're basically purchasing those top 500 companies. And if one company starts to lose its value, it gets knocked out. And then the other company that has gained value gets put in, right? And so these are some of the advantages of an index fund, is that it sort of protects you and makes sure that you're still having stock in profitable companies over time, right? It's also diverse. You may be a healthcare professional like us, and so you may have some insight into healthcare companies, but you may not have as much knowledge in tech companies or utility companies or energy companies. And so one of the great things about index funds is they are diverse. So if one industry starts to go down in value, if one industry starts to tank, you've got stocks in other industries that you may have never heard of that can sort of cushion that blow and may even be more profitable than you expected. And so I like index funds. I think they are diverse. They also are low cost. They allow you to sort of maximize returns from a lot of different companies while also minimizing any losses. And so I think that that's some of the reasons of why we do index fund investing and why it's one of the go-to measures for a lot of people, especially those who are starting off in investing.
Some of the things that you said, I just want to reiterate. Past performance does not predict future performance, right? And I think that that's a key element in investing in general. We like to look back retrospectively, like, oh, okay, this company did well. It does not guarantee that it will do well. So it is important that we shield ourselves from risk with investing. My mother would always say, and there's a common refrain that I'm sure that we have heard, is don't put all of your eggs in one basket. And I think index funds allows us to do that, not put all of our eggs in a single basket by allowing us to protect our assets. And that's one of the greatest benefits from diversification, is decreasing your liability. Also, one of the things that I love about index funds, Leisha, is, I don't know about you, but it's easy. It's simple. It's set it and forget it. I don't have to spend so much time doing research and understanding what is the evaluation of a company, what are some of the threats to that company, thinking about the industries and how this industry is performing and what do I predict their performance to be in the future. So it allows for me to have diversification to protect my assets, decrease my liability, and it's easy. So that's one of the greatest benefits that I see to index funds. When you're purchasing index funds, Leisha, I have a question. Where do you go? So you mentioned that your employer switched
Nationwide.
nationwide, one vendor to another vendor. And so now it's with Fidelity. Do you typically purchase most of index funds from Fidelity? And then if you are purchasing Fidelity index funds, are you purchasing them in a Fidelity brokerage account?
So sort of where am I purchasing them and which type am I purchasing, I think is what I'm hearing you ask me. Okay. So one of the things that I think is important to note is that when you are investing through retirement accounts, as I am investing through my work retirement account, you cannot just invest in whatever you want. Even if you wanted to just buy 20 shares of Tesla, you don't often have that option. When you are investing through your job's work retirement account, they give you different options to choose from. And oftentimes those options are a bunch of index funds, which is why understanding this is so important. I would venture to say that the vast majority of people listening to this have probably never selected how they want the money in their work retirement account to actually be invested. But if you wanted to select it, because maybe you don't even know how it's currently invested, what you would do is go to your plan vendor or broker, right? Mine is now Fidelity. And you would look at what investment options you have. And what you will likely notice is that for me now, it will be filled with a lot of Fidelity index funds. And so because those are oftentimes the options that I have to choose from, I will be investing in Fidelity-based index funds, right? When I was with Nationwide, it was some Nationwide-based index funds because those were the options that I had to select from. So one of the things I want you to be aware of is the kind of index funds that you select may be limited by the options that your job gives you. We'll talk into the different kinds of index funds in a little bit, but I plan to purchase a lot of the Fidelity stuff once it fully transitions over to Fidelity. When I am not investing in my work retirement account, let's say I'm investing money in my Roth IRA or backdoor Roth IRA or solo 401k, or maybe just in my regular brokerage account, which firm's index funds do I select? Usually I go with Vanguard. They are typically my go-to, but to be honest, I really don't think it matters. One of the questions that I think I should clear up right now, as I'm realizing I might not have been clear before, is that if you are purchasing an index fund, let's say you want to purchase the S&P 500 because you want to purchase stock in the top 500 companies, or maybe you're purchasing the United States International Index Fund, which is like basically almost all of the stocks from around the world. Whenever you are purchasing those index funds, you have different versions from different brokerages. What do I mean by that? Fidelity has its version of an S&P 500. Vanguard has its version of an S&P 500. Nationwide has its version of an S&P 500. Charles Schwab has its version of an S&P 500. So each brokerage firm has their own version of various index funds. So I know that can be confusing. You would think, wow, if it's the S&P 500, shouldn't there just be one? Not necessarily. Each brokerage firm sort of has its own version of those types of index funds. And I really do not think it matters which brokerage firm version you purchase. They're basically all the same for the most part. If you look at the correlations, like 99.9%. So it really does not matter from my perspective of which brokerage firm's version you actually select. If I have a choice, I usually choose Vanguard just because they've been around a lot. They have known to have sort of the lowest fees and the most efficient type of index funds. And so that's why I like Vanguard. But when I am not given the option to invest in Vanguard because I'm investing through my work retirement account, I will just choose that version's brokerage firm's type of index fund. So in the past, it was Nationwide because that's where the retirement account was held. Now it will be Fidelity because that is where it's being moved to.
Thank you for sharing that approach. You know, when I think about investing in my work retirement accounts, I mostly choose a target date retirement fund. I usually push the date out a little bit so that the distribution of stocks versus bonds is more aggressive towards stocks. But I don't invest specifically in certain indices within my work retirement account. So now I'm going to have to go back and think about that approach because I know the target date retirement fund is very diversified and it often includes a lot of index funds in itself. It's just that, of course, with a target date retirement fund, basically there is an advisor who will change the mix of stocks and bonds and asset allocation depending on your retirement date. And so as you approach retirement, it becomes more conservative and includes more bonds and conservative investments compared to when you're farther away from your retirement, then it includes more aggressive investments like stocks. So that's really good to hear. And Leisha, when I think about Fidelity and Vanguard and brokerage accounts, it's like, wait, how do you choose? And it seems like you really like Vanguard, but were there any other considerations that you had besides the cost of the index fund itself in choosing a brokerage account?
Well, actually, let me correct something. I like Vanguard funds. I like Fidelity better as an institution. Let me explain the difference. Vanguard has been known to have the most efficient index funds. So I like Vanguard funds for that reason. They also have pretty low fees. But to be honest with you, Fidelity has low fees. Charles Schwab has low fees. A lot of these index funds that I invest in have pretty low fees across the board. When I chose a broker, let's say you listening audience maybe want to invest in a Roth IRA or a backdoor Roth IRA, right? In order to do that, you got to call a brokerage firm because that's where those accounts are held, right? You keep your cash in a bank account, you keep your investments in an investment account. And the different companies that house those investment accounts are called brokerage firms, right? So you got to choose a brokerage firm. Brittany, you're asking me which brokerage firm I choose, right? Do I choose Vanguard? That's one option. Do I choose Fidelity? That's another option. Do I choose Charles Schwab? That's another option, et cetera, et cetera. I actually chose Fidelity. The reason I chose Fidelity is because I'm the kind of person, as you already know, Brittany, who asks a lot of questions, right? If I don't understand something to the T, I'm going to ask a million questions until I understand. That's the kind of person I am. I don't like to be confused. And so I feel like if I'm going to invest my money in a certain place, in a certain way, I want to understand exactly what's going on. And so because I'm the kind of person that likes to ask questions, I'm also the kind of person that can sometimes be a little impatient. Now, I like to say I like to be efficient, but sometimes that come across as impatient, and I recognize that. But when I combine those two factors, the fact that I like to ask a million questions and I'm impatient, that oftentimes means I don't enjoy sitting on hold on the phone for forever. And so I like to be able to drive myself to a brick and mortar place, talk to a live person, and ask all the questions I want. And so because I know that about myself, I chose a brokerage firm that actually had brick and mortar stores near me. And Fidelity does. And so if you Google, most people who live in cities like I do, I live in Atlanta, like you do, you live in Boston. If you went to Google Maps and typed in Fidelity brokerage firm, you could find an actual branch there. And that was important to me. So I wanted to choose a place that had brick and mortar places that I could walk into and talk to a live human if I had any questions. I also feel like, this is my personal experience, right? Fidelity has better customer service. Vanguard has the most efficient funds. Fidelity has better customer service and a more user-friendly platform. And so for someone like me, who's a a do-it-myself investor, it was very important to me to have my money, the most of my money at least, housed at a brokerage firm that had good customer service, a user-friendly platform, and had brick and mortar locations that I could walk into and talk to a live human. So those are some of the factors that went into why I chose Fidelity. Now, that's not to say that Charles Schwab doesn't have brick and mortar places or whatever. I know a lot of people that like that company, and I think they're probably fine. I just, again, chose Fidelity.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. We also use Fidelity and Vanguard. And personally, I have found both of their customer services to be adequate. I think between the two of them, I'm very appreciative of how they've helped to explain things and coach me through all the clicks that I need to do in order to do it myself. And I haven't physically showed up in anybody's brick and mortar store. So it just really depends on who you are and what you value. And what is common between us is that the customer service is really important, that there's someone who can answer the phone, someone that you can talk to and ask your questions without feeling you are bothering them. And that has been tremendous for me. Also, if there's an issue, we usually get a letter or a message or something like that. So I'm very appreciative. We also use Charles Schwab personally, but I haven't interacted with their customer service, so I can't speak to their customer service. Okay, so let's just do a recap. So we've talked about what index funds are. And basically, index funds are a group of stocks or bonds that mimics the performance of a specific index. And then we talked about some of the benefits. We've highlighted diversification, decreasing your risk, less effort because you're not buying and researching individual stocks, and that it's also cost effective. So I kind of want to land there, Alicia, because you also talked about efficient funds for Vanguard and the cost. Can you speak a little bit more to what are you looking for as far as cost for an index fund? And what does it actually mean to have a cost for an index fund?
Yeah, whenever you're investing money, you have to pay for that. It's not free. You not only pay for the individual investment, but there's usually something called an expense ratio, which is the fee that you are charged to actually purchase that thing in the first place. So you pay for the actual investment. Let's say if you want to purchase the S&P 500, I don't know how much it is. Let's say it's $200 or a portion of that. So you pay that $200 in this example, and you also pay an ongoing fee to continue to invest in that. And that ongoing fee is usually called basis points. I don't want to get too technical, but you want to look at the expense ratio. So you can see how much it's going to cost you to continue to invest in that thing by looking at the expense ratio. So when I talk about Vanguard has low fees, Fidelity, I think for a lot of their index funds that are passively managed also has low fees, I'm looking at that expense ratio. Usually my rule is anything under about 15 basis points is pretty cheap. 15 basis points is an expense ratio of 0.15. For most of these index funds though, you can get it for 3 basis points, 4 basis points. What does that mean again? That's an expense ratio of 0.04, 0.03. And so I'm looking at the expense ratios. Another thing I'm looking at is how much in taxes am I going to have to pay on that thing? And that gets into the efficiency, right? The more that an index fund is buying and selling or switching the companies into the funds, sometimes that can incur capital gains taxes. You don't pay that if you are only invested in retirement accounts. You don't pay that if you're only invested in a Roth IRA. But if you have a brokerage account, you are going to be charged some of those fees. And so I'm looking at the efficiency of the index funds. I'm looking at the expense ratio of each fund. So if you've got money invested, let's say your financial advisor, for example, has your money invested in certain things. One of the things I encourage you to ask that financial advisor is, do you mind telling me the expense ratios of the funds that I have, right? So you can get an idea of how much you're actually paying. And again, my rule is anything above 15 basis points, anything that has an expense ratio above 0.15, I think is pretty high. And so that's what I mean by efficiency and fees. But I think we should back up just a little bit because I think there are some other things to clarify. Whenever you are purchasing an index fund, you have the name of that index fund, in this case, S&P 500, but each index fund also has an abbreviation. And those are those sets of random letters. I find that some people get a little tripped up because when they actually try to purchase the index fund, they're like, I see some random letters. I don't know what that means. I'm a little nervous. Think of the acronym. And so whenever you're investing in an index fund, it's got the name and then it's got the random set of letters, which is the acronym. And we talked about earlier, as you mentioned, Brittany, that each brokerage firm has its own version of those index funds and its own acronym. So if you're trying to purchase the S&P 500, you can purchase the Vanguard S&P 500, or you can purchase the Fidelity S&P 500, or you can purchase the Charles Schwab S&P 500. If you purchase the Vanguard S&P 500 index fund, it has a set of letters. If you purchase the Fidelity S&P 500, it has a set of letters. And so don't be tripped up by those random sets of letters. I think that sometimes that can kind of take people for a loop. The other issue that I have found that people will encounter is that they are not able to purchase the index funds. I've gotten questions, I don't know if you've gotten these questions, Brittany, that say, Leisha, I actually tried to purchase the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund, which has stock from all over the United States, but it told me I wasn't investing enough money. It told me that there was an investment minimum of $2,000 or $3,000. You won't run into that problem if you have only invested inside of retirement accounts or Roth IRAs, but you will run into that problem if you try to invest outside of those kinds of accounts. So if you are somebody who has ever tried to invest money in an index fund outside of a retirement account, you might run into that issue. Hey, it says there's a minimum investment required. What is a way to kind of get around that? You say, Leisha, I don't have $3,000 to invest in one time. What you can do instead is purchase the ETF version of that index fund. And so that's kind of what I wanted to bring up here is that whenever we talk about an index fund being a group of stocks or a group of bonds that follows an index, examples we gave before, S&P 500, Total United States Stock Market Index Fund, Total International Index Fund. You can purchase an index fund or you can purchase the ETF, Exchange Traded Fund version of that index fund. The reason I'm bringing this up is because when you purchase ETFs, there are no investment minimums. And so it can allow you to sort of get around that hump. So again, each index fund has two different types. You can actually purchase the index fund or you can purchase the ETF version of that. Hopefully that was clear, but I just wanted to make sure that people weren't going to run into any issues whenever they try to invest.
All right. That's really helpful. Honestly, I haven't run into that personally when investing with Fidelity, but if you're purchasing these mutual funds through Vanguard, then definitely I've seen that alert. And when I'm thinking about what are the letters, the acronyms, I don't know. I just Google it. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, like, wait, what did Leisha say? I need to write down any letters so that I can make sure that I purchase the proper thing. You want to just Google it and say, okay, I want to purchase this thing from Fidelity and I want to purchase the S&P 500 or I want to purchase the NASDAQ or whatever and look at what that acronym is. One of the things I also do when I'm trying to think about cost efficiency, because I want to ensure that when you're thinking about your finances, you incorporate the expense, right? The expense is going to deduct from how much you're actually gaining. If you have a high expense ratio, then that stock, any gains or returns on that index fund is going to be diminished by the expense. I like to Google it and then pull up the prospectus and look through the performance and what is included and also find that cost there. Leisha, when you are comparing index funds, do you do any comparison or are you typically someone who just sticks to a certain type of fund? Like you stick to the S&P 500 or you stick to the Dow Jones? Like what is your approach when you're purchasing funds?
Yeah, so that's a great question. My approach is I kind of follow my written investment plan. I have a plan of how I want my money to be invested, what percentage of certain index funds I want my money to be invested in. And so when I am, let's say, doing my backdoor Roth and I've got $7,000 to invest because that's the maximum contribution each year, I say, all right, let me look at how much money I already have in these different buckets. And now let me say, okay, I know that I want, for example, 45% of my money to be invested in the total United States stock market index fund. And so I'll put 45% of the 7,000 I have to invest in that one. I know that I want 20% of my money in the total international index fund. And so I will say 20% of the $7,000 that I have to invest will go into that one, so on and so forth. So I think another question I should say might be, how do I decide what percentages of each kind of index fund to invest in? One of the questions that I've gotten is, Leisha, there's like a million different index funds. How the heck am I supposed to choose? When I did look at the index funds available to me to invest in at my job, I saw 30 options. I don't know what these options mean, and I don't necessarily want to take the time to Google all 30 options. And even if I did Google all 30 options, I don't know how much of each I should have. These are some of these common questions. And this is why I tell a lot of people, when you are starting off investing, I actually think a good investment strategy is to maybe put your money in a target date retirement fund, like you mentioned earlier, Brittany. One of the things that I really like about a target date retirement fund is that it automatically invests your money in 4 of the most common index funds. All right. So when you have your money invested in a target date retirement fund, your money is being invested in 4 of the most common index funds. And if you did not select how you want the money in your work retirement account to be invested, this is actually how it's being invested. The default option at the vast majority of employers, invest your money in a target date retirement fund. And how do they do that? Well, they take your age, right? Because most jobs know how old you are. And they take the year it would take for you to turn 65. So if you're going to turn 65 in the year 2050, your money's invested in the target date retirement fund 2050. If you're going to turn 65 in 2040, your money in your work retirement account is invested in the target date 2040 retirement fund. That's how your money is being invested. I mentioned that the target date retirement fund has your money invested in the 4 most common index funds, and those are the total United States index fund, which basically has your money invested in all the stock from all the companies in the United States. Total international index fund, which has your money invested in almost all of the public stocks from around the world. Total United States bond fund, which has your money invested in almost all of the bonds in the United States. And total international bond fund, which has your money invested in most of the bonds from around the world. So you notice a trend here. It basically has your money invested in everything, but everything is not given the same weight. The bigger companies, the more profitable companies hold the vast majority of your money. And so when you look at the top 10 holdings in the United States index fund, it's like Meta, which is Facebook. It is Alphabet, which is Google. It is in Tesla. It is Nvidia. It is in Berkshire Hathaway, which is Warren Buffett's company. And so that's kind of how your money is invested. So I wanted to make crystal clear that if you have never done this, you've never invested on your own, the only thing you've done is contribute to your work retirement account, and maybe that was even automatic. Your money is invested in a target date retirement fund. And that target date retirement fund, again, has your money invested in the top 4 most popular index funds, which is Total United States Index Fund, Total International Index Fund, Total United States Bond, and Total International Bond. And as you mentioned, Brittany, the percentage that your money is invested in each of those funds changes based on your age. So if you are around age 30, about 90% of those index funds are going to be in stock-based index funds, right? So it's going to be in Total United States and Total International, and about 10% is going to be in the bond ones, Total United States Bond and Total International Bond. And then as you age, the percentage of stocks decreases and the percentage of bond increases, usually by around 5%. So when you're around age 30, it'll be 90% in stock-based index funds and 10% in bond. When you turn 35, it'll be 85% in stock-based index funds and 15% in bonds, and so on and so forth. And so the percentage sort of changes automatically. But I like that as an investing option. Your money's invested in almost all of the stocks and bonds from around the world. You've got the most money invested in the larger companies. And I think it's a great option. It's a set it and forget it. Your money is diversified. And for a lot of people starting out, I say do that. Not only in your work retirement accounts, but also maybe in your Roth IRA, maybe in your brokerage account. You go to Fidelity, you go to Vanguard, and you say, I want to open a Roth IRA, or when you start to do your backdoor Roth IRA process, and you put all the money in the target date retirement fund. I think it's a great option for a lot of people starting out. Once you get more advanced, like I've been doing this for several years now, I really don't have a large amount of my money in target date retirement funds. I just invest in those index funds individually. I can save a little bit money in expenses by doing it that way. I can manage things on my own. I also may change the percentages of things a little bit it, invest in maybe a couple of additional index funds. And so that's sort of where I am in my investing journey. But I think for somebody who's looking for a simple solution, for somebody who's looking for a set it and forget it solution, for somebody who is looking not to screw things up, I think that a target date retirement fund is a great option.
Okay. In my retirement accounts, that's what I choose. I choose target date retirement funds. I haven't really thought about much except pushing the retirement date back so that it's invested more aggressively. So whenever you Google Fidelity target date retirement funds from your target retirement date, just don't click the first one. Click through, scroll down, and see what the other options are. Well, Alicia, is there anything else that you want to tell us about index funds and how we can be smart with our purchases to guarantee or hopefully result in more returns?
Yeah. So I guess one of the first things is to make sure that you know how your money's invested. Most people probably have some money invested in their work retirement accounts. And so just understanding how that money is invested is probably step one. And if you don't like the way it's invested, right, maybe changing the way that money is invested, making sure that you understand what an index fund is. Hopefully you do. Making sure that you actually look at the expense ratio, right? If you don't know how much something costs, Google the exact name and search for that expense ratio. That's going to be very helpful. If you're getting started, I like the use of target date retirement funds. I think they are very helpful for a lot of people. Don't be alarmed when you see those random sets of letters. The next step, I think, is to come up with a investor statement. And if you're not sure how to create that, you can work potentially with a financial advisor on how to determine what percentage of your money may be best in one index fund over another. I mentioned before that I have about 45 to 50% of my money in a total United States stock market index fund. I have about 20 to 25% in a total international index fund. I've got about 10% in real estate index fund, another 10% in a small cap index fund, which basically has my money invested in some smaller companies, and got 10% right now in a bond-based index fund, different kinds of bond-based index funds. And so that's sort of how I have my money invested. There is no one size fits all. I would encourage you to kind of do a little Googling. I know on the White Coat Investor website, he has a blog post that I really refer people to, which is called 150 Portfolios Better Than Yours. And he goes through different combinations of portfolios and why people chose to invest in that way. Some people put all their money in a S&P 500 index fund. Some people put all of their money in a total United States index fund. Some people put all of their money in 2 different funds, all of their money in 7 different funds, all of their money in 3 different funds, right? The popular 3 fund portfolio. And so I think it is helpful for people getting started is to sort of figure out, okay, how much money do I want in these different index funds? And again, if you're not sure, target date retirement fund all the way. But if you want to try to do something different from that, I think it might be helpful to understand how other people invest their money and the rationale behind it. And if you're a physician listening to this, I think that that blog post could be really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, let's go into our fun money. Alicia, what are you doing fun with your money?
I'm like, what am I doing fun? I'm actually trying not to spend as much money, but that has been a struggle. So, me, I love to travel. And so I know at the top of this episode, you mentioned a winter break trip for your family, as well as a trip for your family to Las Vegas. I've said multiple times on this podcast about the Bachelorette cruise, which I'm about to go on in about a week or 2 with my friends. I am also planning a trip in April for a conference. I'm also going to Puerto Rico for another conference. And so part of my fun money is actually thinking about what I want to do when I am not at the conference. Because we talked about earlier, unlike you, I don't always attend all the conference sessions. And so when I'm at these different conferences, I've got one in Puerto Rico, one in Kansas City, and one somewhere else that I'm blanking on at the top of my head. I think it's in Savannah, Georgia. So when I'm at these different places, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm going to spend my money on doing something fun within those cities. So when I'm in Puerto Rico, I got some places in mind I think I want to see. I've been there before, but it'll be nice to kind of explore the city again. I've never been to Savannah, Georgia, despite living in Atlanta. And so I think I'm going to explore the downtown there and maybe eat at a couple of restaurants. And who knows what I'll do in Kansas City. We'll see.
I've never been to Kansas City. So yeah, you'll have to let us know. All right. So similar to you, I am purchasing flights for our travel. And I'm always so struck by how much it costs. But one of the things that I have done is I've just purchased it, said, okay, whatever, just pay for it, and then monitored the cost afterwards. And thankfully, I've done that because I've saved like $300 on tickets to Orlando per ticket because afterwards we purchased the flights with Delta. and the tickets were way too expensive. But I saw that there was a price reduction. And so I had them modify the price. And so that has been very rewarding and fun for me to know that, oh, okay, well, I have this $300 Delta flight credit saved. So that is one of the things that I am doing fun with money.
Ooh, I love that for you. I love that for you. I've been racking up the Delta miles as well. So whenever I travel for a conference, I usually don't pay for it with points. I usually pay for it with cash and then get reimbursed. And one of the reasons I like doing it is because I like to rack up different credit card points. And I usually use my Delta miles that I've racked up for domestic travel. And so I'm kind of along those same boats with you of like, okay, let me utilize all of the points and miles I have to my disposal.
Yeah, Alicia, you're all about strategy with the travel over there. So lots to learn. All right, people. Well, we will see you in the next one. And thanks again for listening. Hello, and thank you for listening to our podcast. And because of that, we have something for you, our Wealthy Minds Blueprint.
Have you ever thought to yourself, I wish I could be better with money? Do you want to start investing and saving for retirement, but keep delaying because you don't know where to start? Our Wealthy Minds Blueprint is here to help.
This guide will teach you what you didn't learn in your training so you can stop being confused about money and start taking what we call wealthy-minded action.
We'll help you become a master of your finances and simplify investing so you can get started today. Take control of your financial future by downloading your free copy of the Wealthy Minds Blueprint now and start building the wealth you deserve.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Brooke. I'm recording a little disclaimer for my mommy, Dr. Brittany Halford, and her friend, Dr. Lisa Taylor. Just so you know, they're not financial advisors, tax professionals, lawyers, or financial planners. Everything you hear is for education and entertainment. It's not strict financial advice, you know. So use your best judgment, chat with a tax professional, and all those other people that you need to talk to. Thanks for tuning in today. Keep cruising on your journey to wealth and wellness. Bye-bye.
One of the most important things you can do is ensure you have long-term disability insurance. Long-term disability insurance secures your income if the unexpected happens and you are unable to work due to medical illness, chronic conditions, or an accident.
Unfortunately, all insurance agents aren't created equal. Some of them are so focused on making a sale that they fail to reveal certain necessary information, tell you about discounts available, or clearly explain the process. Pradeep Bhato and his team at PKA Insurance Group are different. They have a reputation of putting people over profits and always doing what's best.
If you need life insurance or disability insurance, reach out to Pradeep and his team today. They will help you get the insurance you need with the service you deserve.